Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another live spoiler discussion for Daredevil Born Again. This is Season 1, Episode 4, that just got done airing about an hour ago. If you've been watching this as you've been going along, you know that we've been breaking down the episodes and kind of going into full spoiler discussions. If you join us live in the live chat and you want to talk spoilers for Daredevil Born Again, please put in your comments, put in your questions. We will happily sit here and chat about this all day with you. We love this shit. If the graphic didn't give it away, I'm Dalton Burdett. I'm with the amazing Nick Iricchio. Nick, overall thoughts on episode 4 in general, and then I'll give mine, and then we'll kind of go into our little discussion here.
Yeah, I mean, this is, dare I say, probably maybe my favorite episode of the season so far.
Yes,
Um,
it's one of
you
my
know,
favorites.
I think it's just, I think it's really when you start to see the show developing to what it wants to be, well, what
Mm-hmm.
it is, but I think it's sort of when we sort of see the threads of where the stories are going to be going throughout the rest of the season. And you get the glorious return of John Bernthal's Frank Castle, Punisher.
Oh yes.
It is a brief scene, but to me, it's a powerful scene. But to me, it's not the most powerful scene in the episode, which we can get to that as we sort of go deeper into the discussion.
Yes. So for me, this is one of my favorite episodes of this season. And for those of you who've been following the channel, you know that Nick and I have seen the full season. We're not going to get any spoiler details of anything away in the future episodes, and anything that we theorize or say, like we're also not going to use any knowledge that we know while doing that. So don't worry there. But even with the episodes I've seen, this is easily a top 3 episode of the series, and I think that this is an excellent follow-up to episode 3. It also establishes excellently of what's to come for the season. You also, kind of turning it into the spoiler discussion now, you also get the first glimpses at Muse. You get him in the beginning and a little bit at the end. So you know that threat is looming, that threat is coming. The Frank Castle sequence where they have that conversation where he gets in his face and confronts him about Foggy dying and basically telling him, like, I know it's eating you up. I know what I think he says, I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like I can smell the guilt on you. Like I'm uniquely qualified to like understand what you're going through. And he basically just tells him, like, it's going to keep eating at you. It's going to keep killing you. It's going to keep hurting you. It's never going to go away. And you feel like shit because you haven't done a goddamn thing about it. And, to the point where Matt even like punches him and apologizes. And I love when Frank says, why are you apologizing? It's the first honest thing you've done in the conversation. And first of all, the acting between these two, like, you missed John Bernthal coming back. You didn't realize how much you missed him until he was back, especially how much you missed him interacting with Charlie Cox. Because even when we got the Punisher spinoff series, we didn't get them interacting since 2016. And you want to know something crazy? Season 2 of Daredevil dropped exactly 9 years ago today, which is when he came back to the MCU. Exactly 9 years, which is crazy. But it's an excellent scene, and Charlie Cox's acting, especially, just when he finally just like breaks from being confronted with what Frank is talking about and how Foggy's death is really hurting him, and even the little speech he gives where he says, essentially, I'm paraphrasing again, but he essentially just says, like, you and I can go our whole lives and never amount to any of the decency that Foggy was. And that even affects Frank a little bit. Like, the camera lingers on Frank after Matt leaves, and Frank is like, he took that in. Like, he didn't just ignore that. And I think that it's one of my favorite scenes, not just in the series, but in the MCU. Like, I love this sequence. But going to what you were saying earlier, was the other sequence that you loved, the one with the niece of Hector, Ayelet, and Matthew Murdock in the beginning?
It's not. It's actually the scene with Leroy.
Oh, okay. Go on.
But I do want to harp on Punisher a little longer, if that's all right. Unless you wanted to come back to that,
Nicholas, we can always harp on Punisher. Look at who you're talking to, buddy.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
mean, we talked about it recently on our last episode where we broke down the Netflix series.
Yes, our tier list, which you can find on the channel.
Yes, if you haven't checked that out, it's a great video. But one thing I sort of talked about was just that the character of Punisher, it's so easy to default into this sort of brute murderous character thing. And part of the beauty of it is John Bernthal's performance is so layered and complex to me. I think he does a great job of adding so many dimensions to a character that you could easily just have be a killing machine, right?
Hmm.
And just watching it and Frank just immediately picking up on why Matt's there when he shows up and immediately he just clocks. He's like, "Oh, you want to get your hands on someone and you're coming to
Yeah.
me like
Yeah.
you're looking for me to talk you out of it." And he's like, "I'm
Hmm.
not going to do that."
Hmm.
And then it's really the moment to me that it's my favorite moment of the episode though is um when he says, "Oh, your buddy died, like say his name."
Mm.
And he's
Yeah.
like, "Don't do that." And Frank's like, "Jesus Christ, man, like say his fucking name."
Hmm.
And it's such a great thing because like you can tell that Matt's been repressing that thought of it. And when someone that close to you, passes away, repressing those feelings and emotion, it eats you alive. And it is better to let their memory live on through that sort of thing. And I think that's something that Frank is more attuned with, which I thought
Hmm.
was like that was such a small little detail that I really enjoyed. Of like you can see Frank like say it, say it, say it. Like
Yeah.
it's
He
gonna help you in the long run.
he calls him a coward for not saying it. He drops the coward on him.
We
But
love when people get called cowards.
yes, and a little character thing that they're clearly setting up for like later, which I don't know if it's going to be in his little Marvel special presentation that they're going to do, but he's on like a new medicine because like he's aging, and I feel like that's going to be like addressed later for Frank, is that he's aging, and I thought that was like an interesting little tidbit that they were throwing in there. Um, I also appreciated how Matt brings up like the cops logo on the bullet casing and saying like, "Oh, look whose logo's on here," and Frank calls the cop. He basically says like, "Yeah, they're a bunch of bullshit fanboys," which
Mhm.
is a fun dismissal. But then Matthew Murdock says like, "Yeah, well, a lot of them are cops," and Frank says, "What's that got to do with me?" And how Matt was kind of lying about not bothering him about Foggy. Like you can clearly tell that like Punisher's lying about like that not bothering him, and
Well, I mean, their whole dynamic is like really like tit for tat, like one for one.
yeah.
Like I made you say his name, and now
Hmm.
I'm going to tell you that I hear my son's voice constantly. Like
Yeah.
they do have sort of this uh give and take dynamic, if you like,
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely they do, and I'm sure we'll dive into more Frank Castle as well. But I want you to talk about the moment that you wanted to bring up with the episode that you enjoyed.
Oh yeah, no, it's when he has this case, right? We see sort of toward the beginning of this episode, this guy getting arrested for stealing uh fiddle faddle caramel popcorn. And
Hmm.
I'm only saying the full name because I love Charlie Cox's delivery of the word fiddle faddle caramel popcorn. But it was such a great thing to see, because you're sort of used to with all these like sort of lawyer procedural shows, right? Like really anything the win is not getting what they want to give you, right? As a sentence. So him being like, "Oh, it's 30, but you've already had 10 days served, it's going to be 20 or 10, and getting that." And he's like, "No, it's probation. It's probation." And just his whole sort of speech of like, "You want me to be applauding 10 days? Like last time I was in jail, I missed my appointment. I got taken off food stamps. Like it's a cycle." And I feel like that's something you don't typically get to see with like a lawyer procedural type
Mm.
show is really that. And it was just such a great one, the whole bartering up until like when he's saying like, "You're my lawyer, get your ass out there, get me probation."
Hmm.
And then Matt doing the best that he can and being like, "This is the win." And Leroy's whole speech of like, "It's not a win. You want me to come here and say thank you?" Like it just was such I thought just a great dramatic scene just throughout the episode.
No, it was, and like what Leroy said specifically that got to me was he said they would rather spend double or triple the money keeping me in here than they would to feed me, and he's like, that is the problem,
Mhm.
and that's why I'm not going to celebrate the 10 days that you're getting me. Although you want to talk about good Charlie Cox line deliveries when he's like telling him like, "Hey, the thing has security cameras, like we know it's you," and Leroy says, "Could it have been a scroll?" And Charlie Cox just goes, "Nope." Like
Like just immediately, like no,
just
not it,
that delivery was so
not
good.
it. No, but yeah, like
Also,
what you said, that whole line too. They'd
mhm,
rather spend this amount to lock me up than feed
mhm,
me. I mean, it's I think that the show on a whole, the whole season, just does a great job with commentary on a whole, quite frankly, with like Fisk being in office, and as you're seeing now, sort of with Punisher and the cops that have quote unquote adopted his logo. I think that this was just a nice cherry on top to all of that. Like I think it's just they're taking the time to have these impactful storylines and to see the repercussions when you're used to seeing the glamour of like we won the trial.
Yeah,
Not that Matthew ever wins, but
of course, and like going back to that whole moment with Leroy, it's also kind of reminiscent because like basically Matt just gets annoyed the whole episode with Leroy, with Frank, and he's getting reminded of his failures constantly. And like him and Foggy in the original series, they used to look out for the little guy. They used to literally look for clients in situations like Leroy. So like hearing that from him with the context of the old show, I'm sure it was really getting at him and weighing on him, which leads to his break later in the episode, which I thought was interesting. But going back to the Ayelas of it all, I want to shout out the actress's name. It's Camila Rodriguez, who plays Angela del Toro, who is the niece of Hector Ayala. Wow, she did a great job in the episode, especially just in her little opening scene with Matt, where she's basically, I like that she comes in and the first thing she says is, "I want to see him." And then Matt's like, "No, you don't." And then she has that moment where she's like, you got him free. They put a bullet in his head. He's just Hector from the Heights, and now he's dead. And she drops an F-bomb. She's, "They're the fucking cops." And then she just collapses and like hugs Matt. And she's just like, "It's not fair." And Matt says something because Matt's like clinging to not wanting to be Daredevil. And he says like, "We have to believe that the system will get his killer." And she kind of like plays it off like whatever. And, they're clearly setting up like the comic where she will eventually become the new White Tiger. They didn't, obviously jump the gun, but, I think that I assume that that's eventually coming. I don't know anything about that, but I assume it is. And it's one of those things where I thought it was set up really well, not only for the future of the MCU, but also just for the character of Matt. Like you could really tell, like it's just constantly weighing on him. And I actually want to jump to the end of the episode. Something that I love that the show's doing is having Matt and Fisk both try to be things that they are not. And at the end of this episode, you see both of them. He's becoming Fisk. He's becoming Daredevil again. Like they're both hitting the fuck it point of like, fuck it. Like I gotta do what I gotta do. So seeing Matt look at those masks and take his baton and start practicing his stuff, and then seeing Fisk eat whatever he wants, and he has fucking Adam locked in a cage because you knew from the beginning, like, well, whoever Adam is, they aren't safe. And hey, he's keeping his promise. He's not dead. Adam is not dead, but he is locked up, and you can tell like from the close-ups on his knuckles from the other episodes that that's who he's been beating up. And it's just like, damn, like it's so cool to see them like build each other. Like one really can't exist without the other, and they just can't escape that nature, that violent nature that Kingpin talked about in the first episode, which I thought was just really interesting, and I liked seeing that play out.
Well, I think it's interesting too from the standpoint of like their journeys really right now are pretty isolated from one another.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's not like one can't exist without the other, but it's just interesting. Like no matter how hard they try, right, they cannot repress that part of them, even though it's not directly correlated at this point.
Yeah, and
which I think is a cool way to do it.
Yes, and I saw a great quote. I forget if it was from Charlie or Vincent, but they were on a podcast recently where they were talking about like the Fisk Matt dynamic, and one of them said, it's almost like, think about if you're like a huge sports fan, like your team. Picture like your rival team, like your rival sports team. What if that rival just disappeared? Would you be happier or would you be sad? And it's like, that's a great point, actually. Like, it's almost like they can't...
the plot of Lego Batman.
Yes, correct. But like, and it's also how Matt and Fisk are basically exist in this echo chamber of needing each other to hate each other to exist. And that's kind of where we're at. And seeing them both be reborn in this way is very fascinating and interesting. I also don't think I'll ever be able to listen to the song "We Built the City on Rock and Roll" ever again.
See, it did a great job with like, this was a very character driven episode. It was very dialogue heavy for the
Hmm.
most part, and it was like everyone just getting the shit beat out of him, right? Matt has to deal with the niece. He has to deal with Leroy. The Fisks are in therapy and everything like that, which that was a great scene as well.
Yes.
Because it's such an interesting dynamic, right? When you have a character like Fisk who is this just sort of hulking brute who has these violent outbursts, and just to put him in that setting where he has to be calm, collected, and like express his feelings, and it's a great in to understand how Fisk's mind and his mentality work, and it really is just reinforcing the devotion to Vanessa and how that is detrimental to him ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also love the scene where the therapist, Heather Glenn, Matt's girlfriend, pulls Vanessa aside to ask her like if she's safe. And
Mhm.
Vanessa like cuts her off and says, "You're very sweet. He's not capable of hurting me." And like it's an interesting point because it is true, but it's also an interesting power dynamic from Vanessa, which is
Yeah.
like something you're starting to get used to seeing. And later in the episode, like you almost see that the therapy's kind of working, like because at the end of the episode they're chatting and she's like, "I'm not the same person I was when you left," and he says, "I know, you're even more like beautiful, or you're even stronger." Like he basically compliments her, and she's attracted to the kingpin, not to the mayor, and like that's so interesting, and because it's who he
Mhm.
wants to be, but he's trying so hard not to be. Again, this is a fantastic episode. Like
Yeah.
it's one of those things where when I do rewatches of the show, I will often go to this one likely, and
Mhm.
it's. Oh, we also have to talk about Matt flirting with the girl in the legal office. Huge fucking fan of that. Um, I thought the scene was good. It was quippy. It was neat. It was more about the legal stuff that I didn't know, where he's trying to argue probation for his client, and she keeps trying to tell him like he's crazy, and they would have this back and forth, and it's very flirtatious. And
Mhm.
another great line delivery from Matt is he's trying to get like less time, and he goes, "Can we also talk about the fact that it's petty larceny, which comes from the French word petit, which means," and she's just like, "No, you're not going to get less time," like just going back and forth. And
Well, even just the whole like he got her down to 2 weeks, and then he was just like, "What's 2 weeks?
2 weeks. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
what's 2 weeks compared to zero?"
Yeah, yeah. And then
Um, but again, and it works so well, right? These little moments of levity, but then I love that you're watching that and you're in it, and he gets it down to 10 days, and you're like, "Oh, you know what? Yeah, he got it down to 10 days. That's pretty good." And then it immediately cuts back to like the reality, like we were like, "That's not good enough," and you're like,
yeah.
"We just saw him try."
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's, you know what it is, and this is a great point about the episode. It's Matt losing faith in the legal system, and
Yeah.
you're seeing this slowly happen because we've seen his struggle in season 3 of Daredevil with his personal faith of being a Catholic,
Mhm.
which is kind of back and strong, even though he feels guilty. He can't even walk into a church, which is a detail that I like. But now his faith in regarding the legal system is starting to dwindle, which in normal situations he would put on the Daredevil suit and go do something about it. But he's cutting himself off from that, and it's so well done. I'm a big fan. And something else that I'm a big fan of too is as these episodes come out, like more details are coming out about the reworking of the show and what was the same and what was different and all that. And
Mhm.
basically, episodes 2 through 7 were going to be episodes 1 through 6 originally, but a lot of it is retooled, repurposed, removed around. An interview came out tonight with Brandon Davis of Phase Hero and the director of this episode. And this director was just going off about the process and everything. And he was like, "Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff from episodes 2 through 7 of the show that like I shot for my episode, but they were like, no, that works better in this episode." And then they would take stuff from that episode and put it in my episode because it flowed better with the story. So like there's stuff all over the place. And he complimented the producers. He was like, specifically he called out Sarah Amat. He said Sarah Amat and the editor's name was Stephanie. She's like, they would sit and like detail everything we shot and like rework it beautifully. And he's like, I've watched the episodes not knowing what's coming now because of how different it was. And I'm like, wow, they did a great job. Like he was like, it works out really well. He was also very complimentary of the pilot episode. He was like, that was good. That was a good idea. And like just going on. It's a great interview if you guys haven't watched it. But something else that he reveals that I thought was interesting is he says that when they were shooting the scene with Matt and Frank, that scene was originally going to be later, and another director directed that scene because it was supposed to be in a later episode, but they needed to add a couple lines from Matt, and they couldn't ADR it, like you had to see Matt say it, so he's like, I'll never reveal it, but there are a couple shots of Matt that we reshot like months later. And he's like, and the costume team did a great job. Like, you could never tell, and that's why I'll never tell you. It's kind of like what he was saying, and it was really interesting. But and on top of all of that, Entertainment Weekly, right as the episode got finished airing, they dropped an article where they interviewed Jon Bernthal talking about the episode and coming back and his special presentation that he's going to do. And Jon Bernthal straight up says in that interview, like, oh, by the way, I turned down the original version of the show. I wasn't in it. And then
That's crazy.
Yeah, and he literally is talking, and he's like, yeah, they came to me. They said, here's what we're doing. I said, I don't like it. And unfortunately, we had to walk away. Like, he gives a more nuanced answer than that. But he's like, when they got reworked, they came back. And when they came back, he's like, he doesn't say this, but like, obviously the guy running the show now was a writer on Punisher. And but he does say is he's like, when they came back the second time, they were a lot more open to what I wanted to, like my thoughts on the character, where I was interested in seeing him going, than the first time. And he's like, because the first time it wasn't going to be connected, and they have a universe to run, which I understand, but I really, I feel very strongly about the character, and if I'm going to do it, I want to do it correctly. And then he basically wrapped his quote up saying like, the Marvel team does an exceptional job like building a universe and having stories to tell and knowing what's to come next. But the amount of freedom that they've given me to go into that universe, but do it in a way that I feel is the way it should be done, I'm very grateful for. And he said that for the special presentation, like he had to pitch it. Like he had to go in and pitch it before he could write it. And then when he wrote it, he's like, I asked them to, because even when they greenlit the pitch, like I asked them to read it before we went to go make it. And he also said that when I said I wanted to write it, they said, hey, we'd love for you to do that, but we're going to hold you accountable as a writer and not just an actor. And he was like, great, I want to do that. And he goes, and they did. They stayed on me as a writer. And he goes, but I enjoyed it. Like, I love it. Like, he's basically just like, I love this character. I love this shit. So, like, them allowing me to do this, like, was really beneficial. So is it written
already?
Yeah, I think it might be shot.
Oh.
Actually, it's not shot. I think the article does go on to say it hasn't been shot yet, but he's going to shoot it soon. And, like, it's supposed to air either right before or right after. I think it's right before Born Again Season 2 it's supposed to come out as almost like a precursor.
Okay.
So
I found it interesting. I pulled up the article too because I wanted to read it, and I found it a pretty interesting quote that he says, and it kind of ties into something that you were saying earlier. He talks about Marvel coming back, and he says, they really brought me into the conversation. He says, we really got specific about where Frank is psychologically and where Frank's at physically, which you had brought up the medication. So that's very clearly going to be probably a big element of the aging Frank.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think it will be. And I'm so fascinated by that idea just as a huge fan of the character, because it's not something that a lot of comics do. There are some comics that go into it, like for every character, but specifically like someone who feels that like their life's mission is to take the pain that they've suffered and inflict that pain on people who are causing pain. That person can't do that forever. Eventually they're going to get sick. They're going to die. And like, I'm so fascinated by like someone like Frank Castle dealing with his own mortality. Give it to me. Pump it in my veins. I want to see it.
Basically Logan.
Essentially, yeah.
Isn't there an Old Man Punisher comic?
I think there is.
I think there is. If I'm not mistaken.
It's relatively recent, if I'm not mistaken.
What happened to Frank Castle and the Old Man? Oh, I think it's like, yeah, because I think they did the whole like Old Man universe. Right. Yeah, Old Man Punisher. There it is.
Now, you know what they'll never give to me, Nicholas, but I would like it. I would like this as a special presentation that's non-canon. just give me Punisher kills the Marvel Universe. That comic is so good. It's so good. And I would love to see it.
For a minute there, I really thought that maybe that was a potential for Deadpool 3 being like Deadpool kills the Fox universe.
Yeah, because at one point, Deadpool also killed the Marvel Universe in comics, so there's that
That's what I
too.
mean. So I thought maybe just swap it over a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm more curious to see, like, in the future with Punisher, like how much are they going to like tie him into the MCU? Because like I love the idea of like Frank Castle talking about Steve Rogers. Like I would love to hear about that. I would love to hear about all kinds of stuff. But it is what it is. To Daredevil specifically, guys, next week episodes 5 and 6 are going to be dropping. So it's going to be
whammy.
It's going to be double whammy, which means I got to stay up extra late to do this, which is fine. I'm not complaining. We love it. We'll be okay. But it's just one of those things that you got to do. 5 non-spoilers, just my thoughts. 5 I enjoyed, but it's one of the weaker episodes of the season for me. And like after watching it, it totally makes sense why they put 6 in there. Because dude, if they ended it where they ended it with this episode, and then you had to wait another week to get to 6, I would have been pissed off as a fan. I would have been pissed off. But yeah, that's where we're at.
No, I think 5. I enjoyed 5. It definitely feels the most serialized of it all. But 6 is a banger.
6, dude. God, 6 through 9 is just banger, 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 banger. I'm so excited.
Yeah,
I'm so excited.
5's a bit of a momentum killer, but not terrible. But man, 6 through 9 is just wild.
You guys aren't ready. When they put out 9, because like when we got our screeners of it, we only had a limited time to watch it.
Yeah.
When they put out 9 on Disney Plus and I have it in all of its 4K glory, I'm gonna watch the shit out of that thing. And here's the thing: I've been buying all of the Marvel, the Disney Plus 4K steelbooks, which tells me eventually maybe we'll get a 4K steelbook of Daredevil Born Again. If Marvel makes 4K steelbooks of the Netflix shows, I'm going into debt. I'm serious debt. Like I will pay an exorbitant amount of money to have those on 4K. Like, I don't think you guys understand. I love those shows. I'd have all of them. And I have, quick fun thing before we wrap it up, I have in my house Blu-rays of Daredevil Season 1, Jessica Jones Season 1, Daredevil Season 2, Luke Cage Season 1, and Iron Fist Season 1. Because Netflix used to be cool pre-Stranger Things where they would release Blu-rays every now and then. But I don't have the American ones. I have the UK ones, I think, or the German ones. But essentially, Netflix stopped doing physical media when they realized, like, oh, we want people to just watch things on our service. But
smart move for a streamer.
Yes, but when they can't like remove the shows from Netflix, and we didn't get the announcement yet that they were going to be on Disney Plus, like there was like a 6-day period where we didn't know where they were going to go, and that's when I ordered the Blu-rays, and then I got them, and then it wasn't for like another 2 to 3 weeks where Disney Plus announced that they were getting them, but for a period of like 3 weeks, one of the few places you could watch those shows was in my house. Like, and I'm sure there's like a couple thousand copies of it around, but like it's not the same availability as just clicking play. Okay, I had them all, and I still have them. But please make 4K steelbooks. I would buy the shit out of them. Seriously.
I mean, listen, these streamers, man, they get a little itchy trigger finger to remove stuff from the platforms all the time. What happens when Disney Plus just goes away?
I know. Going to the DC side, my 4K for Penguin just came in, so I have that now. That's exciting.
Did you have to order that from another country, or is Max cool?
Max is cool. Max is cool. I've been able to get a couple, DC-wise, I've been able to get a few things from Max. I got Penguin 4K, Peacemaker Blu-ray. They fucking didn't make a 4K. And I got Zack Snyder's Justice League on 4K as well.
Is Creature Commandos available?
I know that they've announced a Blu-ray. It's not out. And I don't think they're making a 4K, which is upsetting. But you know how it is.
Yeah, it looks like a Blu-ray's announced, but I don't see a release date for it.
Yeah, it'll probably be sometime late summer, early fall. They're gonna wait till after Superman.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, guys, that will do it for our live spoiler discussion of episode 4 of season 1 of Daredevil Born Again. What did you guys think of the episode? Please put your thoughts in the comments down below. We'd love to go through them. Join us next week where we will talk about episodes 5 and 6 spoilers after the show. I love doing these. Thank you for joining me, Nicholas.
Of course. Thanks for having me. And yeah, stay tuned next week. Watch the previous episodes. Watch our full series review on the channel, and tune in Friday for our next live show.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you as always, and we'll see you next time.